All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you for those of you who are just now joining us. Thank you for tuning in for today's webinar. Our topic today is banishing burnout and how to identify and cope with chronic stress at work. My name is Anna Tan, and I am a program coordinator at WorkWell NYC. And burnout is a growing occupational phenomenon. Managing a stressful workload and maintaining a good work-life balance can be challenging for many people, and at times it can feel overwhelming to the point of exhaustion. If you are one of those people, you're not alone. We're very excited to start a dialogue on this topic, as today we are joined by Rachel Steinmetz, Senior Manager of Program Implementation at the Office of Thrive NYC. Rachel will give an overview of burnout, explain how to recognize and identify signs of experiencing burnout, as well as sharing strategies to help us combat and prevent burnout. Before I turn it over to Rachel, I would like to share a little bit about WorkWell NYC and what we do. WorkWell NYC is the city's worksite wellness program, and we are here to help you live well and work well. Our goal is to create work sites that make it easier for our employees to live healthy, active lifestyles. Health is not just the absence of disease. Health is physical, mental, financial, emotional, and we know health exists on a spectrum. We are here for you with health and well-being resources, programs, and support to help you move more, eat well, be well, and take action to prevent disease, no matter where you are on your health journey. Experiencing burnout can take a toll on mental and emotional health. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Steinmetz to help us understand what burnout is, as well as what we can do about it.
Thanks so much, Anna. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to share a little bit about the program that I work with, Thrive in Your Workplace. So we are a public-private partnership as part of the Office of Thrive NYC that works with a lot of nonprofit and for-profit employers throughout New York City to help create mental health-friendly workplaces. We work with employers by consulting to shape a supportive workplace mental health strategy and guiding employers to adopt at least one workplace mental health innovation. And I'm excited to be here to talk with you all about burnout because that is something that has been identified by many of our employer participants as a very serious issue facing their workforce. We've been working hard with them to create some lessons learned, and I'm excited to share what we've learned with you all. So now I'll pass it back to Anna to go over the agenda for us.
All right, so today's agenda, we are going to talk about what is burnout. We're going to talk about strategies to address burnout, creating your self-care action plan, and share some resources and tools available to you.
So to start out, I wanted to provide a definition about burnout. Burnout's one of those words that we hear tossed around a lot of the time, but many people may have different ideas about what burnout is and actually means. So burnout is a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress and manifests as one or more of the following: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance or negativity related to one's job. And a lot of this results in being less productive at work. So note that burnout relates specifically to workplace stress. This is from the World Health Organization's designation, and it is also one of the things that is unique about burnout, in that it is specifically related to the workplace. While the term can be used in other scenarios, in this case, we refer to burnout as relating to workplace stress. One thing that is important to note are the differences between regular stress and burnout. They can appear similar and share specific traits, but stress is usually situational. For instance, something bad happens and then you feel stressed out. Whereas burnout builds up over time and cannot usually be pinpointed to one issue, but rather a whole host of issues. So another way to think about it is that stress can be seen as over-engagement, becoming hyper-involved and hyper-emotional, whereas burnout often shows up as being disengaged, feeling hopeless or detached. So this is also why the WHO differentiated between burnout and stress, and that while everyone experiences stress as part of everyday life, burnout only occurs in certain situations. We will talk a bit more about what those look like in the future of this presentation. So, what are some of the warning signs of burnout? There can be physical, emotional, and behavioral signs. So physical symptoms can look like headaches or stomach aches that result from feeling this chronic stress. And the emotional symptoms can look like feeling drained or being unable to cope with the normal occurrences in daily life. And behavioral symptoms can look like difficulty concentrating, which can also result in reduced performance. So what does burnout look like? You may see this in yourself or in some of your colleagues, and it can look like being bored or being spaced out, a lack of participation in meetings, increased irritability and anger, and also a lack of interest in activities that were previously important or interesting. And I think the last point is a really important one because it notes a change, that you don't start out burned out, but over time this develops. And while many of us, particularly in the city, we're very passionate about our work, it can also be really hard to maintain that and later on result in things that were previously important, having a hard time maintaining that. So now I'll pass it back to Anna to learn a little bit more about how some of you may feel about burnout.
All right, thank you, Rachel, for sharing some of the signs of burnout. So now we're going to do a quick poll. How often have you experienced symptoms of burnout in the past 2 weeks at work? Always, often, sometimes, rarely, or never? Please take a minute to respond to the poll question. All right, so it looks like there is some variety in how people experience symptoms of burnout. The majority of people experience these symptoms sometimes, but there is a significant number of people who feel that they experience it always or often. Now I will turn it back over to Rachel to talk more about burnout.
So I think these survey results really actually echo what a lot of the research has shown about burnout and some of the challenges that we're facing. So the World Health Organization declared burnout an occupational phenomenon in 2019, and the data tell an alarming picture. Over 66% of full-time workers report feeling burned out at least some of the time, and up to 93% of employees report high levels of stress depending on the field that they're in. So as you can see, this is a serious problem, and burnout runs across all different types of professions. And I like this quote that really sums up what I think burnout looks like. Dr. Christine Maslach is one of the experts in really identifying what burnout is and what some of the causes are. And I think this quote really sums it up, in that what started out as important, meaningful, and challenging work becomes unfulfilling and meaningless. And again, I think for many of us working in the city and working with lots of different populations, we came here because we felt like our work was really important, and feeling burned out can really make it challenging to continue to support the people in New York that need us. So now that we've identified what some of the symptoms are of burnout and what it may look like, we're going to get to the part that talks about what contributes to burnout. We're going to identify some of the different causes and talk about what they may look like in your workplace. So one of them is lack of control. So this can involve feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, thinking that nothing you do matters to anyone. In addition to having a lack of control or feeling like you can't move your work forward due to a lack of autonomy, there are also specific areas of role confusion that may increase burnout. So role confusion is where an employee may be receiving multiple directives from different people, and they don't know who you're supposed to be listening to or how to process that work. And also what is called role ambiguity, where an employee don't know what their job function actually is. These constant feelings of confusion and high levels of stress and feeling like you're sort of walking uphill but never reaching your goal are related to burnout. A second cause is insufficient reward. So this can again refer to financial rewards, but it also refers to not feeling appreciated or appropriately recognized for your role. Social recognition from peers matters, and hearing and feeling like your work is making a difference also relate to causing burnout. Lack of community. It's important to note that burnout can be contagious. If one person's feeling burned out, it can really spread across different teams and different areas of the organization. Trust is a big theme that we see that can cause burnout, and a lack of trust in colleagues or in the organization as a whole can lead to some of these challenges. So, absence of fairness or lack of fairness. So this is a big one and something that I hear a lot about in the field. When people see unfair things happening in the workplace, it can greatly affect burnout. For instance, if people feel like there are obvious office favorites or certain people are given benefits, such as working from home, when others are not allowed the same thing, it creates tension and can lead to burnout. Also, when there are issues that come up in the workplace, not handling them effectively can lead to burnout. One example might be a coworker that many people have reported concerns about, such as not doing enough work or rude or disrespectful behavior, but everyone tries to ignore the issue or tells everyone else that this is just how things are. These sorts of things can lead to burnout. And finally, conflicting values. So this is when a person has their own individual feelings of what is important to them that they may see their workforce not supporting. So a very obvious example of this might be a vegetarian who was working in a meat packing plant, but I think it can also show up if you feel like your work has certain values that you're trying to spread out into the community, but that you're not necessarily seeing in your workplace. For instance, if you're trying to create messages of respect, but feel that there is not respect in your workplace, those conflicting values can also lead to burnout. And finally, overwork. This is what people typically think of when they think about burnout, is that it's just too much work that any one human could do. But as you can see, this is really only one part of the puzzle. There are many different dimensions of burnout, and overwork is only one piece. So that's important to note because there are many different ways that we can work to address burnout, even though there may be a lot of work to do. Okay, so now that I've hopefully not thoroughly depressed you all, but let you know about what burnout looks like, what some of the causes are of burnout, now we're going to look at specific strategies to address burnout and what you can do to help either prevent this or, as many of you noted in the poll, if you're already experiencing this, some strategies to help reduce those symptoms. So, increasing awareness. I think I learned a lot about burnout in this last year of doing this work with our different organizations as part of Thrive in Your Workplace. And I think just naming the issue and being able to identify what is going on within yourself and noticing that you might be feeling burned out is a really important first step in addressing that burnout. I think a lot of the time in the workforce, it can show up as being really irritable or angry with your coworkers, and that might just be becoming hyperly sensitive about what's going on. So it's important to name the issue and educate yourself about signs of burnout. It can also be helpful to discuss burnout with your coworkers and your teams and see if they're experiencing similar issues or if their managers have any ideas about what burnout looks like and how you can address it. Adopting healthy exercise habits. As hard as this one can be to hear, taking care of your physical health really does make a difference when addressing burnout. Working out can help take your mind off of the things that you may be feeling anxious about, and can also even work to decrease muscle tension, which can make you feel more anxious. Overall, if you continue to work out, it can help build up resources for resilience. So some special activities that you can do are participating in WorkWell NYC programs at your worksite, such as yoga or Zumba. And even if you can't do that, trying to take a walk around the block during your lunch break can help. In addition to exercise, adopting healthy eating habits is important. Food and nutrition affect our mood, and chronic stress, which may be related to burnout, is also related to obesity, heart disease, and other issues related to poor nutrition. Also, maintaining a healthy diet can help reduce crashes from sugar and decrease inflammation, which can also cause fatigue and chronic stress. Here are some examples. Be on the lookout for next month for WorkWell's 5-a-day Your Way Challenge, an opportunity to put into practice incorporating more servings of fruits and vegetables into your meals every day. Adopting healthy sleep habits. I know that insomnia can be a challenge for many of us, but sleeping more can help to reduce both physical and mental injury on the job and also increase productivity. A lack of sleep can cause emotional reactivity, making people more short-tempered and having a hard time controlling their emotions, and can also even reduce empathy for others. When your mind and body are well rested, you'll be able to respond to life with a greater perspective and understanding. Ample sleep allows time for your mind and body to recover from the day's work and can help you achieve your wellness goals, such as stress management. Creating community. And I think this is one of the things that we in the city have already done a great job of doing and can continue to do, to lean on our coworkers and our wonderful colleagues to help create social support in the workplace. Social support can help to prevent and reduce burnout. And there are many different opportunities through WorkWell that can help you do this. To become a WorkWell champion, you can learn more about health and wellness programs and how you can inspire your colleagues. Contact WorkWell NYC to learn more about becoming a WorkWell Ambassador champion. Learning how to manage stress is something that can help with burnout and also in your life skills. A tool to manage stress is developing resilience. And resilience is the ability to withstand, recover, and grow in the face of stressors in the workplace. It is associated with greater job satisfaction, happiness at work, and employee engagement. There are a number of digital apps that you can download on your smartphone that may help increase resiliency and mindfulness skills, such as stress management, meditation, and other tools. Many of them are free with additional content available if you subscribe. You can visit the NYC Well webpage to learn more and see what might work best for you. And finally, taking the opportunity to put yourself in the other person's shoes. It can be really hard to do this, especially if you are feeling burned out or underappreciated. But considering different points of view can help you think about your burnout in the context of the important work that you're doing. If you can't change the situation, it can help to try to shift your perspective. And practicing empathy can foster greater collaboration and create increased buy-in in the work and also supporting your community. Taking a break from technology, put down your phone. The constant being on culture can also relate to increased stress and burnout. So giving your eyes and brain a rest from looking at screens can help you disconnect and reduce burnout. So now I will turn it over to Anna to help us practice putting what we learned into practice by creating a self-care action plan.
Thanks, Rachel, for sharing some factors that contribute to burnout, as well as some strategies for how to address it. Now I'm going to talk about self-care, a strategy that can be utilized in daily practice. Self-care is taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, especially during stressful periods. When we're stressed, it's easy to stop paying attention to things that make us healthy or feel better. As a result, it's good to take a step back and assess how well you're taking care of yourself, as well as how to take care of yourself moving forward. Let's walk through an example of how to do that using the self-care action plan. The full version of the self-care action plan was emailed to registrants previously, but for some of you who may have registered late, and if you have not received it, don't worry, the action plan will be emailed to you again after the webinar. If you do have the action plan, you can use it to follow along with this example. The action plan provides a list of examples of various self-care activities. The activities vary in domain, including physical self-care, psychological self-care, and more. The example used here focuses on emotional self-care. Take a minute to reflect on these items. Next to each activity, rate the frequency of how often you do each one by writing a number 1 through 5. 1 means the activity is done frequently, 2 is occasionally, 3 is sometimes, 4 is rarely, and 5 is never. There is no right or wrong way to complete this section. Remember that the list is not exhaustive, but it may help inspire some other self-care activities you can do later on. Here is an example of the emotional self-care activities after rating their frequency. In this example, the person who filled it out gave mostly a 1 or 2, indicating that the activities are done frequently or occasionally. That means this person is doing a good job of taking care of him or herself in regards to emotional self-care. Now that we've seen an example of rating the frequency of various self-care activities, the next step is to plan how to maintain or improve taking care of your own needs and balancing them with the needs of others. Look back at the areas where you scored a 3 or more. How and where can you fit those activities into your schedule? Write a goal for each area of the self-care assessment, taking care to make them as specific, actionable, and as feasible as possible. Here's an example of what writing out some goals may look like pertaining to emotional self-care. This example demonstrates actionable items that can be done daily, once a week, once a month, and whenever it is needed. However, the thought of setting goals for all of these activities may feel too overwhelming for some who experience very high stress levels. For individuals who feel that way, pick one activity and start with where you're at. As you begin incorporating self-care actions into your regular routine, reflect on how you feel afterwards compared to how you felt before. Keep in mind that though practicing self-care is one strategy that can help reduce feelings of burnout, for some people, this may not be enough. City employees have other resources available to them, which we'll talk more about in a bit. And for some of you, you may feel that you are not experiencing symptoms of burnout at work. Nevertheless, the strategies discussed previously, such as taking care of your physical and mental health needs, developing strategies to manage stress, and building community at work, are all examples of things you can do to help prevent burnout before it starts. Again, as a reminder, WorkWell NYC programs are available to city employees as a resource. WorkWell NYC wants to offer programs and workshops that meet the needs and interests of the city workforce. So for those of you tuning in, please take a moment to respond to this poll. Which of the following wellness activities would you be interested in participating in at your worksite? Facilitated discussions, mindfulness workshops, self-care workshops, movement workshops, or other. All right, thank you for completing the poll. We can see that there is a strong interest in mindfulness workshops and self-care workshops as well. To summarize, burnout is a complex problem that can affect all of us in different ways. You can help yourself and your colleagues by learning about burnout, practicing self-care, and seeking additional support as needed. And here are some additional resources available for city employees. These are all free and confidential, and NYC Well is available 24/7. In addition, the EAP website has a list of agency and union employee assistance programs, which can be very beneficial for many of you. In the coming months, stay tuned for more programs and workshops from Be Well to help you build stress management skills, practice mindfulness, and more. So now we have a few minutes for questions before we wrap up. You may type your questions into the chat box at the bottom of your screen. As you're typing in your questions, we are so glad that you've joined us today and hope you will be willing to share your feedback with us so we can work to create content that is useful to you. Please copy and paste the survey link on the screen into your browser to answer a few short questions. You will also get a follow-up email with the survey link, a recap of what we discussed today, and a recording of today's webinar. And so now I'll hand it over to Rachel to address some of the questions.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. And thanks so much for all of you who are submitting questions now. I'm going to start out with some of the ones that were submitted prior to this webinar, and then go to some of the ones on the screen. So one of the questions, and there were actually a group of questions about this topic, was about how do you balance work and home life to avoid burnout? And so I think I haven't fully figured that out for myself yet. And I think everyone is trying to figure out what that balance looks like, and it can be really hard. So while this will look different for everyone, I encourage folks to think about what they learned in this webinar today about the causes of burnout and see if they can identify some of the main drivers of their burnout. I think burnout can be really insidious in that it shows up as sort of this overwhelming, really negative, depressed feeling that can feel really overwhelming. And since it builds up over time, it can just seem really hopeless by the time you figure out, oh, I'm burned out. So looking at what's causing it and then using that information to identify some solutions for about how to address it. Try to take things once at a time, as it can become really overwhelming if you just create a huge list of all the stressors in your life. Think about your priorities and start to make small changes to see if they help and add on from there. For instance, if you were looking at your work and you felt like you weren't receiving enough sort of social support, reach out to your colleagues or create a lunch and learn or join some of the existing clubs to try to address that feeling of lack of community. A second question that we received quite a bit about is, what's the best way to address feeling overwhelmed and stressed out to a supervisor without seeming like you cannot handle the workload? So I think this touches on one of the most important parts of my work with different organizations about burnout, which is about collaboration and working with management. It can be really hard to do this and speak with your manager about your priorities when you're feeling burnt out. So I think there are some strategies that can make it more likely that you will get the result that you want if you think about them. Try speaking with your manager about the office priorities overall, and then come up with some different ideas for solutions. For instance, if you feel like there is overwork in a particular situation, suggest a few different options, such as increasing the time frame for completing certain work, clarifying the exact tasks and deadlines that need to be done, and making sure there's a clear order of priorities and that you're both on the same page. Also, tone can be really important in these conversations. So try to take some deep breaths beforehand and make sure that you are approaching the issue in a solutions-oriented way to try to bring your boss on your side. Being proactive about identifying strategies can go a long way into increasing buy-in to your proposals. All right. So now let's look on the screen and see what some of the questions are. Wow, we have a lot of questions. Okay, I guess we'll attend for a couple of them. This will be emailed out to participants, so you will be able to use this information and share it with your colleagues and anyone who may not have been able to attend. So let's start out with one of the questions. So let's see. So let's start out. So can someone that does not address burnout lead into depression and mental health issues? So I think burnout can lead into depression and mental health issues, but identifying it earlier on and speaking with your team about it can be really helpful in reducing those symptoms related to being burned out. As Anna mentioned, there are also a lot of NYC resources, especially the EAP, that can really help you gain access to some different resources that can help you address your burnout. It looks like there are a couple of questions about different flexible times. I'm going to pass it over to Melissa on our team to talk a little bit about the city's policies around that.
Yeah, so I see a lot of questions coming in about flexible time and telecommuting, and as the city is 95% unionized, all of those things are negotiated through collective bargaining. So we encourage you to reach out to your union if that's something you'd like to see them try to bargain for in the future.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Can you scroll up so I can see some of those other questions?
Sorry, so many questions coming in, so.
Can you scroll up? Okay, it looks like some folks have said, I think I'm dealing with stress and burnout, and those were also some of the questions that came in earlier. So first I want to say, I'm really sorry. I think burnout is really hard, and it's definitely something that I've experienced in my career. And doing this work with different organizations has been really helpful. And at least if there are situations where I can't change everything, identifying what exactly is causing the burnout and working to identify it. A lot of this is really talking to your supervisor about some of these issues that come up, and thinking about how you can work together to manage some of these times. So I think, I would really start with that, and also reaching out to the different EAPs. I think those can also be a really helpful resource, and looking at the different mental health providers if you're looking for sort of outside support. So it looks like, oh, sorry, the question. So what if a significant contribution origin of burnout is from legitimately too burdensome a workload and or a lack of at least perceived appreciation by management? I think that's something I see a lot, both in many of the nonprofit and other organizations that we work with and thrive in your workplace. And so I think it can be really hard. So a couple of ways to address that, I think, are talking to management about those issues. It can be really easy to tell someone, good job, or I saw that you, stayed late to finish this report we needed to submit for a grant, and I really appreciate that. So I think that can be an important first starting point. And in terms of overwork, being busy, I think it's really related to a cultural decision. Being busy has become such a sort of badge of honor in our society, and everything can't be a priority just because then, there really is no priority if you think about it. So I think working together to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what is a priority can really help to address the sort of work and overload. But I say this, that it's easier said than done. I think, a lot of this is very new work, and we see this at startups, we see this at large organizations with lots of different resources. So I think everyone else is trying to figure this out, and we're working to develop programs to help support this. So another question that came in is, what is the difference between burnout and compassion fatigue? So this is a great question, because I think that these are terms that are really used interchangeably a lot of the time. So, here are some of the more research-based descriptions, but many people just use these interchangeably. The difference is that compassion fatigue is typically associated more with being exposed to trauma. So burnout typically takes longer to develop, but can be harder to address, whereas compassion fatigue, if identified early on, can be managed, and recovery can typically be quicker. So while everyone can feel burned out, not everyone in any type of job, not everyone will experience compassion fatigue, because that can also relate to the different role. Is there a question that you guys would like to, are there additional questions that we should go over? Or we have a lot, and I'm happy to keep working on this or follow up.
So we have one question here from one person who states that a lack of clear leadership priorities causes a lot of stress and a feeling of burnout. With the current culture of doing more with less, meaning less staff, how can one avoid burnout?
Yeah, so I think this is, again, a really tough one. And, really hits on, again, this important issue about culture and burnout. And so while today we've really focused on the issues and actions that individuals can take to reduce burnout, there's also a lot of focus on actions that organizations can help to create systems of support. So part of how we address burnout is how we as a culture look at work and stress, and thinking about the role that work plays in our lives and what that means to us. Identifying priorities and working with colleagues and teammates to figure out solutions and hold each other accountable for the work can be really helpful. But I think culture change takes a really long time. But so the first answer, and again, this webinar is hopefully the beginning of lots of different programs that Be Well and Thrive can collaborate together on to support folks in addressing burnout.
All right, thanks, Rachel. And we have another question here. What if there is not a good supervisor and worker relationship and there's not a lot of support in the field office? In those cases, what can be done to address and alleviate burnout?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, these are really tough issues, and hopefully we can address it by both additional training for managers and supervisors, and also looking at training for individuals about how to address their own burnout. I think it's important to look at, related to burnout, what can you change? And there are always going to be things in different jobs that we cannot change. And so looking at how you can mitigate some of those stressors. Again, we talked about some of these individual strategies that can really help you deal with some of that chronic stress. But I think overall, looking at different organizations and how their overall goals can be clarifying different work, different roles and responsibilities, and how those come together, and increasing communication between each other about what those goals are, what the direction is that the office is trying to go in, can really go a long way in reducing some of that chronic confusion and stress that can result from either not knowing what you're doing, not knowing if you're doing a good job, or just being told to do something that no human could possibly do, or that overwork, there's just work that no human could possibly do. And I think that this is an issue that many people are discovering, and we will continue to look for solutions and collaborate together to figure this out.
All right, and so we have a question here asking, is there a website where we can access similar material to preventing stress or burnout? And definitely you can visit the WorkWell NYC website. There has a list of strategies to learn more about preventing stress and burnout. And the website is nyc.gov/NYCWell, which is a different website that you can access as well. So it sounds like burnout is a very large, complex issue that will most likely not be solved overnight, and it sounds that it requires actions on multiple levels, including strategies on how you can shift your own perspective, such as by practicing mindfulness, but also having a culture change in the organization, which can be building community and also changing the conversation that happens between employees and their supervisors. So it sounds like that there's a lot of work on this topic that still remains to be done.
Thank you so much all for joining us today. We will be sending out the slides and links to the WorkWell website, NYC Well, EAP, and we encourage you all to keep sharing your thoughts, keep this conversation open. This is the beginning of a journey, and we look forward to working with you on that journey. And one more thing that before we go is I'm going to turn it back over to Anna to talk about the WorkWell NYC Pulse.
Yes, one last reminder for all of you. The New York Academy of Medicine is conducting the WorkWell NYC Pulse, an evaluation of WorkWell NYC's health and wellness programs. The survey should take no more than 10 minutes, and for those who respond, you can be eligible to win a WorkWell NYC prize pack. So the agency with the highest percentage of respondents will be eligible to receive a wellness week at work. So we strongly encourage you all to take the survey, which will help us to better plan programs that can meet all of your needs.